I start with a story. A middle-aged woman had a heart attack and was taken to the hospital. While on the operating table, she had a near-death experience. Seeing God, she asked, "Is my time up?" God said, "No, you have another 43 years, 2 months, and 8 days to live." Upon recovery, the woman decided to stay in the hospital and have a facelift, liposuction, and a tummy tuck. She even had someone come in and change her hair color. Since she had so much time to live, she figured she might as well make the most of it. After her last operation, she was released from the hospital. While crossing the street on her way home, she was killed by an ambulance. It's not funny. Arriving in front of God, she demanded, "I thought you said I had another 40 years. Why didn't you pull me out of the path of the ambulance?" God replied, "I didn't recognize you." The title of the sermon is "God Has a Plan." God did have a plan for this woman, but she lost it. Turn with me over to Acts 17.
Go, Tyler. Let's go, Tyler.
The red Bible, it's going to be page number 785. Acts 17, verse 24. It says, "The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live." The question I'd like to address in this sermon is, how do you know God's plan for you? How do you know when God is working in your life? I got 2 practical points. First one, reflect on your life. Reflect. Let's look over in 1 Samuel. We're going to do a little Bible jumping right here at the beginning. 1 Samuel chapter 12.
Come on, Tyler.
Page 198. First Samuel 12, verse 24. The Bible says, "But be sure to fear the Lord and serve him faithfully with all your heart. Consider what great things he has done for you." Consider those things. Reflect on those things. Thinking back to when I was at Boise State. I went to Boise State for 4 years. One story particularly pops into my mind when thinking about this. It was about 6 years ago, which is starting to feel like a long time ago. It was the week before I moved into the dorms for my first semester in college. And I was kind of a scrawny guy back then. I mean, more than I am now. I was a twig. I was short. I had no muscle. It was sad. And I was a hockey player before that, so there was no excuse. But, I'd never been to campus before, and especially by myself. I drove there, and I had to pay my tuition. I'd worked the whole summer, working 2 jobs, and I worked really hard all day, every day. Work, sleep. Work, sleep. The same thing. Made a lot of money just for college. And I thought this would be a great story at the time to pay my whole tuition for my first semester in cash. And so it was a little nerve-wracking. I had $2,100 rolled up in my hand, in my pocket, walking on campus, little guy. And I'd never been there before. I was nervous, to say the least. So I was walking on campus, and the building I was going to was about 100 yards this way. There was a big grass patch. There was a sidewalk behind me and a sidewalk in front of me to get to it. So I passed the first sidewalk, and and I see these two guys standing at the corner of this next sidewalk. You know, I watched a lot of thriller movies and stuff like that, so these things pop in my head. And I see these two guys, and I'm like, oh no. I got $2,100 in my pocket. I can't come in contact with them. And so I started thinking to myself, I'm like, all right, what are my options? Got a little bit of time to think. I can turn around, go back, and take the other sidewalk. That's going to seem suspicious. It's going to seem weird. So I can just walk through the grass, but then again, I don't know if you can walk in the grass in college. This is what was going through my head. So I decide I'm just gonna walk, and I walk past them, keep my eyes to the right, and just book it. Just go quickly. That's pretty normal. So I'm walking past these guys. I get 3 or 4 feet past them, and they're like, "Hey, what's up, man?" So I turn around slowly, and I'm just like, "Hey, I can't just walk away because that's gonna be suspicious too." And they invite me to Bible talk. They're like, "Hey, I'd like to come to Bible talk." And I grew up religiously, so I was like, "Sure, got nothing against that." So I went to the Bible talk that happened before the school started, before I moved into the dorms. And I started studying the Bible and stuff. Later, as I look back at that, I realized how ridiculous all that was going through my head. I was like, you can't walk in the grass? Ridiculous. Anyway. God knew that that's what was going to be going through my head. God knew that's how my brain worked. And that God knew that's what was going to get me to start looking in the Bible. How about your life? Now let's make this applicable. What has God put in your life? Who has God put in your life that He's trying to get you to come to Him? That He's trying to say, hey, that was me. You wouldn't have done that in your right mind. You're out of your mind. That's for me. For a lot of us in here, there have been so many events in our lives that go unnoticed, that we just don't think about. We just let it by and we walk by just normally. Practically, there's one thing that's helped me with this so much, and that's journaling. Journaling gets made fun of a lot. Journaling gets a lot of flack. Journal? Okay, it's kind of emo for a guy. Or diary, whatever you want to call it. But it turns out this is one of my favorite things to do. I journal a lot. You can ask my roommates. I'll just be writing pages. But it allows you to write down not only feelings, but events that happened, be specific. And then the great thing about it is looking back on it years later, and you get to see what was going through my mind. What was that all about? And then you realize, like, wow, if that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be here today. If that one stupid little event didn't happen, who knows? If I would have cut through that grass. God works mysteriously. Amen. Point number 2. Give God the credit. Point number 1 was reflect on your life. Point number 2, give God the credit. Turn over with me to Luke 17.
Come on, Tyler.
It's going to be page 741 in the Red Bible. Luke 17, verse 12. Verse 12, he says, as he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. When he saw them, he said, go, show yourselves to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, he came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? Then he said to them, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. this story, these guys were cured of a lifelong disease. You know, it's something that really there's no heal for. You were shunned because of it, and they were cleansed. And then one guy comes back to give God the glory, to thank God. The rest of them just go and live their lives. You know, not really thinking about what had just happened. Coming back to my story, I've been studying the Bible for a little bit, you know, sitting down with these guys to build my convictions. And, you know, they're just helping me in so many ways. But one Sunday, I went up to my brother and sister's place, their apartment, to do my laundry. You know, because laundry in the dorms is expensive.
That's right.
You all understand. But, you know, just a note on this, I had an awesome car at the time. I really, that was my favorite car this is applicable, I promise. This isn't just a side note. This car, it was a Saturn SL2, and it was my favorite car. It was 4-door, it was a sports car, it was fast. I had aftermarket exhaust put on it, just awesome. I loved to drive it. And every time I left a stop sign or a stoplight, I just gunned it. You know, just a typical college guy, you know, freshman year. And I didn't care about speeding, and I was just like, I just want to race because I have a fast car. And so I was leaving my brother and sister's house, and I got on my clean laundry, and I was sitting at the stoplight, and then, you know, it turns green, and I start to go, and all of a sudden, just, you know, I got T-boned straight from the side, and this guy, he didn't even stop. He stepped on his brakes about half a second before he hit me, and come to find out, he saw he had a green light, but there were no witnesses. Nobody stuck around, and so we had to pay our own way. So I mean, I was a long-haired freshman college dude. My word wasn't going to stand up against this professional guy. But the strange thing is, when I left that stoplight, I accelerated so much slower than I normally did. You know, every single time I would speed away. Had I sped away, I would be dead today. Because the whole front of my car, everything above the wheels was shifted about a foot to the right.
Wow.
And so his car would have been right here. I walked away from that without even a scratch.
Wow.
You know, it didn't even startle me for some reason, and I got a ride back to the dorms and went on with my life. It was a Sunday. I went to our little meeting for the campus ministry, and you know, I moved on with my life. Nothing else happened. We've got to give God the credit. There is no reason that I should be here. You know, there's no reason I should be alive because of that. It was truly a miracle. You know, I know we all have things like this in our life. I know we all have those things to where maybe we feel lucky, maybe we feel fortunate. I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in good fortune. I believe in God. It's God that blesses us. It's God that has a plan. You know, there's so many times in our life where if we would just take a moment and recognize what's happened and give God the glory, we'd realize that there is so much more. You know, there's so much more than filling out a lottery ticket and winning $1 million, which would be awesome, but you know, it's God. There's so many things that happen that if we look at it and realistically think about it, there's no other reasoning, there's no other excuse except for it's got to be God. It's got to be. There's no other explanation. Why would God do these things? Why would God spare my life? Why would God spare your life? Or help you through that situation? What's so important that He would go to that length? Reading on in Acts 17, verse 26 says, "From one man He made every nation of men, so that they should inhabit the whole earth. And He determined time set for them in the exact places where they should live." We already read that, Acts 17, verse 26. Looking on in verse 27, God did this so that men would seek Him and perhaps reach out for Him and find Him, though He is not far from each one of us. God did that thing so that I would seek Him. God did those things so that you would seek Him. I think about a GPS. You know, I used to be totally reliant on my GPS until I moved to St. Louis, and where I really needed it, and it broke. That was a sad day for me. I was a little scared. I didn't know what to do. But, you know, I think about a GPS. It gives you a destination, and it gives you turn after turn after turn. It tells you exactly what you need to do to get there the quickest, most efficient way. You can even avoid the toll roads. And it tells you, well, in a similar light, I want to connect this. Instead of global positioning unit, I think of God's plans revealed, GPS. God's plans revealed. When you're driving along, a GPS tells you, in 0.2 miles, turn left. Well, what if you don't turn left? What happens? Recalculating. Recalculating. Well, that's what I do with the robot right there. I guess I should be in a little box. In the same way, God has a plan for your life. Every time that He does something great in your life, or does some miracle in your life, and we don't look back on it, we don't give God the credit, it's just like we're ignoring that turn. And we're just driving straight. God's like, recalculating, come on, turn. I want you to make it to heaven. And if we don't look back on these events, if we don't look back on those things, that there's no other excuse. We can make up an excuse or a reasoning. Well, I got lucky. But that's not the way that it works. God works in your life. God is working in your life. Maybe that's why you're here today. Maybe you have something in your mind right now that you're thinking of. That's got to be God. Give God that credit. You know, maybe you're not involved so much with church. Maybe it's your first time back to church in a while, or you're just getting back into it, or you've never really been into it. What does this mean for you? Well, talk to somebody. Start getting into the Bible, study it out. Get help. I know for me, it helps so much sitting down with these guys and talking about my life, because then they were able to tell me, well, hey, right there you're being prideful. Right there is what you need to work on, because you're not able to see the scriptures clearly if you're tainted by this sin in your life. So don't let the scriptures just fly by. If maybe you're studying the Bible, maybe you've been sitting down and studying the Bible for a while, and you're making great progress, you're really making changes in your life. Don't let the scriptures just fly by. Don't just read the scriptures and answer the right answer. Think about it. Change your life. It makes all the difference in the world if we look at the scriptures, think about, how does this apply to me? What is this saying to me? I know He was telling these guys back here that they should seek me, that they should seek God. But the Word of God is living and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. This is applicable for you today. Apply it. Don't just let it fly by. Maybe you've been living the life of a disciple. That's awesome. Keep your eyes open. Look for God's callings. Be submitted when God does call you. When God does say, hey, you're turning right here. You're taking a detour, so you're going to grab a couple other people, pick them up, set a via point for you. That was my favorite function in a GPS. I could set a destination, and I could set a half destination. It was awesome. Not many people figured that trick out on a GPS. Well, when I had it. Be submitted to God's calling. Don't just let God's calling fly by. We can ignore it, we can look past it for the rest of our lives, and we will never know. But if we just simply reflect on our lives and give God the credit, we'll realize that God is calling me. God is calling you right now to follow Him. I'd like to conclude with this story, and bear with me, it's a little bit lengthy, but we'll get through it. It's the story of a soldier, and his army was advancing. A soldier stationed on the ridge was signaling when a bullet struck him, and he fell into a bomb shell, a bomb hole. The soldier had been a sailor before going into the army. He was proud of his strength, contemptuous of the weakness of others, and cared only for his own interests. Now his strength was turned into weakness, and the weary hours dragged by. There seemed to be little hope of rescue. His line had been driven back, and he was all alone. The effort of supporting his body and preventing it from sliding down into the water at the bottom of the shell hole exhausted him. About midnight, he saw distant figures outline the sky. They were newcomers, replacing his men. Seemed to be hope, yet they knew nothing of his position, and they made his rescue seem more hopeless than ever. It was terribly hard to keep awake and even fatal to fall asleep. Near dawn, the bombing began again. One shell fell so close behind him that the explosion nearly blocked up the hole in which he was. The water rose to his chest. Now for the first time, it was possible to wet his parched tongue and soothe his raging thirst. But should he fall asleep, drowning was inevitable. His body was trapped in the mud, his strength was gone, and his careless soul was on its way out. Out he was going, naked and strained with the sins of 30 years, into the presence of a holy God, with nothing to plead and no one to intercede. The terror of his death fell on him, and he made frantic efforts to escape from what seemed to be his grave. Again and again he called for help. No one answered. I cannot die, he thought. I'm not ready to die. No method of approaching God offered itself. What can I do? I must do something, he said desperately. Into his mind now came an answering thought. Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee. Not recognizing this as a reply to his question, he still kept murmuring, what'll I do? What'll I do? Again came the thought, call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee. Who should I call? It must be God. The sentence must be coming from the Bible. But if it is God, he must be speaking to his own people. Not to me. I don't know him. Something must be done soon. But how to begin? Where is God? At last he began to form his request. Oh God, if there is a God, and if he can hear 1 out of 10,000 that are crying to him this morning, and if he is willing to listen to a voice such as mine, hear me. If this is in the Bible and can be stretched to cover me, this is my day of trouble, and I am calling. This done, panic began to recede, and sleep was falling upon him when he heard someone say, Who are you, buddy? 7th Battalion, he replied. A period of silence, and then, Where are you? He roused himself to answer, Over here. Finally, 2 men crawling over the mud reached the place where he was trapped. Their combined efforts dragged him out of the shell hole. They tried without success, 3 or 4 different ways to carry him back to the post, but they were compelled to stop because snipers fired as soon as they raised their bodies. Now he had to make his own way out. After pointing the man in the direction of the base a half mile off, they went back. So this guy, he started digging his elbows in the ground, crawling, with that hope. I will deliver thee in your hour of need, foot by foot at a time. Several times an airplane passed over, machine gunning the front lines, but each time it reached the point of the crawling body, the firing ceased. Was this due to a need to reload, or was it due to the promise, I will deliver thee? At last, he reached a point where other soldiers could see him, and with a final effort, he raised his body and shouted. One of the first things he did when he got back to camp was ask for a Bible, and look for the promise that had proved to be so true. He was told he would find it in Psalm 50, verse 15. And when he turned to read it, he was so deeply interested in the concluding words, and thou shalt glorify me. He resolved to do this as long as he should live. That verse as a whole, it says, Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me. God has worked in your life in so many ways. We can all relate with this story in certain ways. We come up with those excuses. Well, God doesn't know me. Maybe I'm not there. I betrayed God before. God is working in your life right now to bring you to this, to bring you back to the camp so that you will see, so that you will be able to make it to heaven and find Him. He will deliver you. This is a promise in the Bible. But you have to glorify Him. and you will glorify me. Study the Bible. Commit your life to God. And follow His calling for the rest of your life. Let's reflect on the events in our lives and give God the glory. Amen?
Amen.
That's me.